Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to a very special video episode of our brand new podcast, Getting Into Games. Today, we are joined by myself, Brandon over at Into Games, and if you don't know who we are already, we're essentially the youth careers service for the games industry. So we support underrepresented young people to find their way into the industry through mentorship, game jams, and more. And I'm joined by...
I'm Millicent and I work on the social and content side of Into Games. And for this very special EGX and PAX online episode, we have the wonderful Elle Osili-Wood with us today. Elle is a games journalist and presenter and has worked with the likes of PlayStation, the BBC, BAFTA Games and more. And she's joining us today to chat all about video games, well-being and how she got into games. We are so excited to have you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, really excited to be here actually. I love Into Games, so I'm very happy to have a big old chat with you.
We're very honoured. How have you been these past few months? How's lockdown and everything been for you?
Luckily for me, you know what, it's not been too bad. As a presenter, I kind of thought, okay, well, surely everything's over once lockdown started. And luckily for me, the games industry's been kind of really creative and innovative about the way that we kind of create content for people to consume throughout this. So actually, I've been far busier than I thought. I thought I was going to get maybe a sneaky kind of, stay-at-home holiday, but no, it's actually been quite busy.
That's fantastic to hear. And obviously, we've all kind of been dealing with our own uncertainties and mental health these past few months. And you've recently become a Safe in Our World patron as well. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and what that kind of means to you?
Yeah, so Safe in Our World is a really wonderful charity, and they're both for people inside the industry. So obviously we're an industry that, a recent survey showed has much higher than average instance of things like depression and anxiety. And I think that we're quite a young industry that hasn't learned how to manage things like crunch and burnout yet. So obviously, we do have those issues. And then also people coming into our world, as the name suggests. So gaming can be a bit of a toxic space sometimes. We do have, a vocal minority of players who are kind of very, very unpleasant online. And so it's about making sure that people who come into our world are safe as well and feel protected and feel like they have somewhere to reach out to should they be struggling. And so, I was thrilled that they asked me to come on board as a patron. It's something I really care about. I felt that we needed for a long time. And so I'm really excited about the work that they're doing and hopefully that I'll be doing with them.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. And I feel like it must have been a long road for you to get to this point now where you're kind of a games guru. I constantly see this this brick wall that you've got behind you on Twitter and online, constantly kind of everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And especially now in the kind of games and mental health and wellbeing space. I wonder if you can maybe take us all the way back to your school days and, where your passion for games started and what's brought you here.
So I'm really lucky that I was kind of just born into a family where everybody plays games. So I literally have never, in my life, I've been really lucky that when I was younger, I never experienced that thing that lots of women do, which is they play games. And then when they get old enough to interact with men, unfortunately, they can get persuaded out of that. They can be made to feel unwelcome in that space. I'm incredibly fortunate that I have a huge family. I've got 3 sisters and a brother. Everybody played games. All my cousins play games, literally my mum, my dad, everybody I know. So I grew up with that something being completely normal to me. I loved games. It's how my family, play together. We've, just all seen each other recently and been playing Fall Guys together. It's, that's really one of our communication languages. So, I've just always loved games. I've been so, it's one of the things I'm most grateful for is that, I had that beginning. I went to school. All my female friends played games. I remember playing games at sleepovers. We had big school tournaments. I think I've talked about this before, but the first ever kind of taste of esports I had was playing in a Street Fighter tournament at school. So I really lucked out basically. And so it never occurred to me that games could be anything other than a big part of your life. It never occurred to me that I'd be anything other than just really welcomed in that space. And I might have learned otherwise once I popped up on screen, but at that point I was pretty much cemented in, as I've kind of talked about before. I think people know I went into political journalism at the BBC and asked to kind of cover games on the side there, which they let me do. And so I was very, very fortunate that that was kind of just at the beginning of games becoming a lot more mainstream and people being interested in having somebody who could talk about games. So it was a lot of kind of, right time, right place. I work really hard at what I do, and I, put a lot of work into being so visible and getting this brick wall everywhere it possibly can be. But, you also have to acknowledge when kind of luck played a hand. And for me, it was, being able to be on screen talking about games right at the point people were looking for that.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
go on, you go.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. You kind of say right place, right time, and I feel like the industry changing so much now, and there's so many more people out there now who want to get into that sort of thing. It seems so much more difficult now than it used to be, and I think perhaps when you started, and I don't think in any way it was a luck thing at all. I think it's certainly kind of the work and the time that you put in to get yourself and put yourself in that space. But I think with like the BBC's kind of Inside Gaming that we're seeing now, Jessica Curry's Sound of Gaming podcast on Radio 3, I think we're really starting to see kind of games come into that kind of mainstream kind of political narrative now in a way that we didn't before. Where do you kind of think it's heading? Is it going to get bigger? Is there kind of still a bit of a pushback that you're finding from organizations like the BBC about talking about games more seriously?
No, so this year we've actually seen a really big shift at the BBC. So myself and some other game journalists like John and Erica Webber were part of a big push earlier this year to reconsider how the BBC covers games. And I think that actually that does reflect a shift that we're seeing widely across mainstream media, which is because they've realized just the sheer volume of viewers they could get if they covered games, but it's also because they're starting to recognize games as the art form they are. They always cover them in tech or business and never in entertainment, and I think they're starting to understand the kind of, for me, I've always thought of arts as of games as the intersection of arts, and I think we're starting to see mainstream media consider it to be just that. And so they've started to think, oh, okay, maybe we should covering it the way we cover film or TV, the way we delve into, artistic narratives behind other forms of entertainment. And so, this year I've seen a really big change. I've gotten to talk about some really exciting things. Obviously, I made a podcast for the BBC all about the science behind games, dispelling myths. I've covered things like how games deal with isolation. I've looked at the art of storytelling in Fortnite and how they're changing that. Lots of things that I've always desperately wanted to cover, but I've had to go on and say, no, games are not going to turn your kids into killers, that kind of thing. And so we're moving on a little bit from that now and starting to appreciate that 50% of people in the UK say they play games frequently, and so they don't always need that explainer. And they're interested in, just more niche stories about gaming.
For sure. And I definitely think it's this year, particularly with the pandemic and lockdown, that games seems to be the main art form that's maybe thriving. So we can't go to the cinema anymore. So like cinema's struggling a little bit. We can't go to see live music. We can't go to see live theatre. But video games, it seems so many people I know who've never played games were like, Milson, should I get a PS4 or a Switch? I want to do something in lockdown. And they're all like picking up games for the first time. And I think that's a huge testament to maybe how things are changing in mainstream media as well and how it's being represented. So that's amazing, the work you're doing, and it shows for sure. I'm wondering, I think this is going to be a really hard question maybe with your type of work, but could you take us through like an average day in the life? I'm sure there isn't such a thing, but if you could try.
Okay, so I'll do kind of pre and post lockdown. So I guess currently my days are lots of this. So I've done lots and lots of filming from home. Luckily for me, I actually did kind of more filming at home than perhaps you think. So I have a full setup here. I've got 2 big lights. I've got the wall that you can see that's, designed to be slightly more interesting. I have a mic, I've got cameras, I've got, all that kind of thing. So I even have an auto cue actually. That's just how I really do. I was so prepared for this lockdown. So it's like, I basically do lots and lots of emails. That's like a huge part of my job. A depressing part of my job is just constant emails. So I'll probably be chatting to people to kind of organize, maybe like sending questions across for approval or talking through a production brief, that kind of thing. Just lots and lots of scheduling things in. I do quite a lot of kind of playing stuff just for research. So maybe I'm going to review something, so one of the things I do is arts criticism for Front Row. So I might be playing a game to review it for that. I've been trying to make little review in 2 videos for Twitter recently about games that I love that I don't get to talk about anywhere else. And so, I might sit down, play a game for a bit. I will often have quite a lot of meetings. So the kind of thing that you never see is it's like one day on set and like 28 days of meetings that probably could have just been emails. So, you know, I might have a production call to just discuss what I'm going to wear for something, you know, what the guest is going to be like, if they're, you know, if they need to see questions in advance, if they don't need to see questions in advance, you know, just the kind of prep work that goes into preparing for something. And then, you know, I try to, you know, book my days together. So I'll have big days where I do lots and lots and lots of filming so that I can just put on like makeup and eyelashes once and not have to do it a million times. But that's kind of in lockdown what my days look like. And then pre-lockdown, it was a lot more travel. So you know, last year, I think I went abroad, you know, twice a month, I think it averaged out as. I, you know, traveled every single week. You know, there was a point where I looked at the year and I realized I hadn't spent more than like 4 days at home at any one point. So it was a lot of traveling to set, a lot of traveling around the country, which is really strange because people always think of the games industry as really concentrated in kind of London and one or two other areas. But for me, you did lots and lots of filming kind of around the country in various places. So it would be a lot more kind of going to set and a lot less prep. I think one of the things I've really struggled with during lockdown is that everything, because you're not going to be somewhere together, people get really, really worried about the details. And so you have lots more meetings, lots more prep, which in a way is nice because you do feel really prepared when you go in, but it does mean the admin side goes up a lot, which, you know, when you like just kind of being on screen or doing really fun projects, the last thing you want to be doing is endless emails. And I think that's the side people don't get to see. But yeah, so it's kind of, obviously it's a lot less social now and it's a lot more, I think, you know, I'm really looking forward to not having to manage lighting and cameras and sound myself. But actually the amount of kind of filming work and live filming work and live hosting hasn't actually changed that much.
That's really good to hear, at least.
It sounds kind of like, you know, you're really well set up for lockdown to happen. And I think actually for people now who are going through this actually as well, it's going to be so much easier for young people to be able to create content, to get things out there. You know, I know, well, when the first time we spoke, when we did the very first of the streams for SideQuest, I had to get you to do it all for me because I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't have any of the equipment or anything like that at all. And I feel like now, you know, people are going to be so much more prepared for it. And actually, maybe we're going to move away from needing to travel around for so many of these things, you know, like go jet setting across the world or, you know, traveling around the country or whatever. And that, you know, young people who are going into kind of the same sorts of roles that you're doing, whether it's kind of like presenting, reporting, hosting, even just the streaming, are going to be perhaps a lot more prepared for it now. And I guess the question I'm kind of getting at is I wonder, like, for yourself, you know, what are the real key qualities that you find best help with your job? What are the key things that young people who've just bought themselves a Zoom recorder and have just got themselves a webcam and are thinking about doing the same thing, you know, what are those qualities that they really need to bring out and that they should be kind of teaching themselves?
I think one of the things that I've appreciated more than ever is you need technical skills. So I will say this over and over again. I'm sure people have heard me say this elsewhere. It's not enough to love games. We all love games. Like I said before, 50% of the UK say that they play games regularly. And lots of people think that loving games and buying a webcam is enough. And it's nowhere near enough. For me, my job, you know, as I said, I've literally had to set up a studio. I have to be able to use a DSLR. I have to be able to use my auto cue. I have to be able to comfortably read an auto cue. I have to know how to edit. Okay, so like when I worked at PlayStation, people often thought that my job was just, you know, streaming or popping up to talk about games. And actually, I spent 90% of my time editing videos, capturing footage, writing scripts, planning coverage, you know, so it's about the technical skills. I think particularly for what I do, people forget that, you know, because games journalism looks really fun, and it is incredibly fun. I'm not going to deny that it is, you know, a kind of dream job, but it's also a job, and it's journalism, and you need the skills that a journalist needs. So if you're not very good at writing, if you can't edit, if you don't like to write script, you're not going to get work in this industry. So for me, it's about having those base skills so that, you know, when an opportunity pops up, you aren't one of those people that just tweets underneath it and is like, I've been playing games for 20 years. And it's like, we've all been playing games for 20 years. You know, it's, you know, can you edit? Do you have kit at home to capture? Can you, these are the things that people don't realize. And, one of the things that I'm excited about is that, talented people we haven't seen now do have this big, huge opportunity to be able to do work they perhaps couldn't do before. If you were somebody who would have trouble traveling to a set, well, you can film stuff from home now. If you were somebody who couldn't work in a big city, then you can do it from home now. So this is your opportunity. Make sure that you have the skills to be ready to grasp anything that comes your way.
Brilliant. And that's kind of like a nice segue, I think, into our next question. So that was some brilliant advice. And I'm wondering, what is the best piece of advice you've received from someone else in the industry that you would like to pass on?
Ooh, interesting. I think I always say, and I've heard this in kind of several different forms, but it essentially distills down to just be brave. So I think particularly, for women, for people who, are kind of underrepresented in the games industry, they often feel quite tentative about putting themselves forward. And part of that's fair. It is an industry where you will face unfair scrutiny if you are a woman, if you are an underrepresented minority. But in general, put yourself forward for things. If you made a really great video, tweet it everywhere you can. Make sure you're getting it up on a YouTube channel. If somebody's asking for interesting videos that people have made, put yourself forwards. Be brave. The worst thing that can happen is somebody says no to you. But 90% of the time when somebody says no, they've remembered you. If you were good, if you've got those skills that I mentioned, and you're creating, and you're somebody who is desperate to kind of take advantage of opportunities, then when I've been looking for people, I remember everybody, whether or not I hired everybody. There are people who I'm like, okay, do you know what, I'm going to file them away for next time, or maybe there's something that I could work with them on in the future. And so just put your name out there. Make sure you're on Twitter, make sure you're joining in conversations, you're getting involved in the community. Make sure I can find your work somewhere. You have to make it so that opportunities can come your way. You might be a brilliant writer, but if there's not a portfolio of your work anywhere, I can't stumble across you. And so it's about being brave. I promise you, the most mediocre people reach out for every opportunity. I can say, I need somebody who is a professional director and cameraman, and someone will be like, I've got an iPhone. So like genuinely, you don't realize just the kind of people who are reaching out for these opportunities. And if you're not there, they'll get them. If I can't find anybody, I'm going with the iPhone guy. So like, I need you to be there shouting about yourself, being proud of your work. And so for me, be brave. When I started just reaching out to people, just pitching myself for anything and everything, I would, literally just email companies and be like, I think I would be great. You should hire me, and you would be surprised. It honestly works almost all the time. So for me, be brave.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think really, really great advice. And I wonder, it's kind of like a weird duality, I think, at the moment, that it's like more exciting time than ever. We're saying that like this pervasive kind of narrative around games not being a career or games not being an art form, that's really been broken down, especially over the last 6 months. Everyone has been playing games, and everyone's realized, I guess, the emotional kind of value in playing games with other people as well. And then on the other side of that, the industry, is bigger than it's ever been before. It's the only real kind of creative arts that hasn't really struggled and has kind of actually flourished. So it seems like it's actually a better time than ever, but at the same time, I think that there's so many people who want to go for it at the same time as well. And I wonder from yourself over the last while, have you seen that has it felt like there's been a lot more competition? Has it felt more competitive, or does it feel like actually it's diversifying more and there's lots more opportunity out there for young people to get involved with?
I think there's lots more opportunity. So I'm lucky that what I do already doesn't have a huge range of people in it. So I think, I've joked before that I very frequently sit in a room with everybody who does what I do. There's not a lot of us. So I can't say that you feel huge competition. And I think you also don't feel huge competition because games is, an incredibly welcoming industry. I think I've always felt really connected, particularly to other women who do what I do. They've always been incredibly supportive. Some of the biggest opportunities I've ever had have been because somebody else who does what I do recommended me, and I think that's something people are often surprised about. They think that we would all be competing with each other, and actually that's not what it's about at all. It's literally, it is a network. And I also think that as gaming goes more mainstream, I think you kind of said it exactly, the opportunities are just growing for everybody. So it's not that, you know, more people are now watching gaming, but there's still just space for one host, or, you know, that kind of thing. I think the only area where that's not true is, unfortunately, in games development itself. So obviously we are seeing more and more studios, they are growing, but unfortunately in the UK, we actually have more people who graduate from kind of a game related discipline than there are jobs available. And so I think that I'm lucky that I'm on the side of the games industry where that's not really the case, and there's not huge competition, or at least not from people who genuinely could do the job. I think lots of people want to be a games journalist, but perhaps aren't actually journalists and wouldn't be able to do it. But, you know, in amongst people who are journalists and would like to write about games, we kind of all do. So it's, you know, it tends to not be quite as competitive as, unfortunately, the game dev side.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's something obviously we're trying to sit in the middle of and navigate and work out how, you know, you kind of help foster those opportunities and provide opportunities for the right young people as well. And I think it's a bit of a kind of balancing act. As you said before, you know, the industry is brand new, you know, and it's kind of a bit of a wild west at the moment, it feels, you know. There's so much still to learn, and there's so much still to kind of like put in place and formalize that other kind of creative industries have. And that very much around kind of like inclusive hiring and diversity policies, like how you ensure you create the right pathways for young people, regardless of education, irrespective of background. And I think that there's some kind of like studios doing some really, really interesting things. So there's the Chinese Room, the guys that made What Remains of Edith Finch, have just launched like a 6-month internship program that's basically no formal qualifications needed. They actively kind of like encourage people with caring responsibilities, kind of financial responsibilities, neurodivergence, or physical or mental disability, and have said kind of basically just opened it up, and it's like a full-time permanent position. And I think that that's kind of like where we need to head, is think about how we kind of break down some of those barriers, because not only are there so many young people coming out with qualifications, there's kind of so many barriers that they're going to hit just when they're applying for jobs. And I guess the kind of point that I was getting at is around kind of like, how do you think as an industry we can help kind of better support those young people? Obviously you talked a little bit about your work with Safe in the World and kind of that intersection between kind of games and wellbeing, and of course you've done a huge amount of work around civil rights issues as well, and talking about how what work we can do to ensure that the work we do is anti-racist and the things we talk about are anti-racist. And I wonder from your perspective how you think the industry can do better to support those underrepresented people.
I think that lockdown's been a really great opportunity for us to understand the different ways that we can work. So I think one of the problems with our industry has often been that we're really secretive. You know, we like to crunch, unfortunately. I think that's the same in journalism and on the dev side. People push themselves far too much. They are pushed by their employers far too much. They work hours that aren't healthy. You know, they work such long hours that they don't see friends and family. You know, we as an industry have, I think, as you kind of said before, we're very, very young. We don't have great practices in place. Not to say that other entertainment industries are necessarily leading the way, but, you know, they do have better unions, for example. They do have better support networks. They do have organizations designed to support people. And we are just in the very, very infancy of that kind of thinking. And so I think that lockdown, you know, seeing people work from home, seeing people still work effectively whilst managing their family responsibilities around caring. Perhaps there's somebody who has a disability that means they can't work full time, but they've, you know, I've seen several people step up and take roles that show we actually, this idea of working full time is a really strange one. What is full time? You know, studies show that we only work for 4 hours in a day anyway. And so I think that this has been a really great practical application of lots of little, you know, studies and bits of information that we've had over the years, that perhaps what we have set up as a working environment and a work day aren't really realistic for a lot of people and don't really make sense, aren't grounded in reality. And so what I'm really hoping is that we take a lot of the flexibility that we've created during 2020 and we, you know, enshrine that in workplaces, because I think for so many people, that's what's made a huge difference to them, is just not feeling as though they have to put their life on the back burner to get ahead in this industry. You know, we ask people to, you know, I think, you know, I've talked about this before, but one of the things that we do in our industry is, because we all feel so lucky to be here, we accept terrible conditions and appalling work standards because we think, well, you know, it's a dream job. People would love to do it. You know, there are millions of people who would step up and take my job. And so they put everything else aside and they accept, you know, poor wages in some cases. They accept terrible crunch, really appalling, overbearing work conditions. And so I'm really hoping that studios have learned, because, you know, at the end of the day, I don't expect businesses to be empathetic. I wish that they were, but in a realistic world, I don't think that they are. And so I hope that this has just proven in a financial sense that you can continue, that you can be just as successful when, you know, being far more flexible with your staff and managing, you know, their personal needs alongside your profit motive. And so I'm really desperate for us to remember this, and not to look back in 2 years and be like, do you remember when you could just like go and see the doctor and it wasn't a terrible thing, or you could, you know, care for your mum if she needed it and it didn't mean you had to use all your holiday. And so, you know, fingers crossed it's something we remember, because I think that alone would just make a huge difference. Like I said, I see far too many people in our industry put their life on the back burner, and I'm hoping that we start to really look at what balance means in the games industry.
100%. And I think, like you said, this whole year will hopefully have been such a huge learning curve for businesses, game publishers, development companies, any industry, including the games industry. I think has discovered so much of like how things can change and be done in a way that benefits everybody, rather than in the way that it's just always been like this, so that's the way it is kind of thing. Like, this has really knocked a lot of people awake, I guess, to how to better run businesses, to care about your employees. And I really hope, like you say, we remember this, and going forward there are positive changes and just better work conditions for everyone, so the industry does look a bit more accessible and young people have the confidence to even try. Like, you know, like you say, growing up, games was always a big part of your life, but I guess for many it's like, I love games but I could never work in games. Like, that's not a job, that's just something I enjoy doing, that could never be me. And I guess what we wanted into games was for people to think, there's nothing stopping that for me, I can try. And I guess to kind of like start wrapping it up on a really nice light note, we do have a couple of quick fire fun questions for you, if you want to take it away, Brandon, with the first one.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, actually, I think you asked me this, a very similar question in this very first side quest stream that we did, and I actually stole it. I stole it and asked it to every single other person on the stream after that. And I think I must have asked maybe around 30 people, and every single one gave me a different answer. And this one I think is slightly different. So it's a different question to what I asked you last time, at least anyway. So you have been stranded on a desert island. You've got electricity, fortunately, and you can take one console and one game with you. You can play it for as long as you like. What game do you take?
Oh, that is so difficult. Okay, I'm taking a PS4. Like, let's be realistic. What am I taking? Oh, is this such a boring answer? I want to say that I take Ghost of Tsushima, I think, which is so boring because that's like a brand new game. And I don't know if I'm just, basically, it's blown me away. I am utterly obsessed with it, to the point that I started to think photo mode was real life. And I genuinely was like stopping at beautiful vistas in the street and being like, oh, no, wait, this is real life. But I think that during lockdown, it's been a really special game to me. It's just a game that, you know, sometimes you find a game, I think I tweeted this, and it feels like it's been custom designed for you. So you recognize that it might not be perfect for everybody, but for the way you play games, it's really, really perfect. And so, you know, I would say that for me was a game that's designed to exactly, you know, once you kind of up the difficulty a little bit, I think it's like a perfect game for me. And it's really beautiful. I found the escapism really fantastic. So I think that's the one I'm going to choose, just because I've never been able to test any of the others in a lockdown situation. So that's the one that's been most successful for me.
I think that's a very good answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a hugely like transportative game, right? It's just like takes you away and makes you feel like you're in a Kurosawa movie, which is just so cool. And like, especially in lockdown when you're stuck in like the same the same building for most of the time. You want something that just like completely removes you from that. Totally different time period, totally different part of the world. And it's so immersive as well, because it's just so much like finer detail in that game that just like all brings all those elements together, just create this hugely like compelling experience. Absolutely amazing. I think a great answer. As long as I suppose the desert island that you're on isn't a desert island that's just like Ghost of Tsushima, then maybe you take something else.
Okay, and our next quickfire question is, so if you were a game developer, what game would you most love to have worked on, either past, present, or future? So it doesn't have to exist yet.
I would love to get my hands on Call of Duty. I really love Call of Duty. I think that it is a really brilliant game. It's one that stood the test of time. Like, yes, it has up and down years, but I am always excited for new Call of Duty. And I think that they are really underappreciated in kind of the storytelling they do. I think if you look at someone like Taylor Kurosaki, like he's really he's somebody that kind of learned under Amy Hennig, and he does really great things with storytelling in a game where people aren't necessarily, you know, they would like it with or without storytelling, and he really tries to innovate in that space. And I adore Call of Duty, like just absurdly much, and I would love to make one. I would love to be kind of handed the reins for a year and to make my own installment.
And I'm sure we would love to see what you would do with Call of Duty as well. That'd be fantastic.
More of the ghillie suit mission from Call of Duty 4. I think that might be my favorite mission of any game ever. That just amazing storytelling. Okay, so final question that we have for you before we finish up, and that is, I've completely forgotten. Do you know what it is, Millicent?
Yeah, it's what is the game that first made you cry?
Oh, so I'm not a big crier at all. I hardly ever cry at anything. And the game that made me cry was Everybody's Gone to the Rapture by Chinese Room, who we mentioned earlier. One of my favourite games of all time. As mentioned, I'm a COD fan. I'm an FPS girl. I like a game with a lot of action, and it blew me away. It was the first kind of, I hate walking simulator because I think it's really reductive, but it was the first game of that type that I was like, oh, wow, it completely changed, you know, what I thought of as a game. And there's a moment in that where I don't want to give kind of too many spoilers away in case anyone hasn't played it, but there's basically a woman who knows something terrible has happened, and she can't force herself to go and check, because once she checks, she knows it becomes real. And it was heartbreaking, and I cried and was so surprised because I never cry. But the writing in that is exquisite. It is incredible. The voice acting is, I think, some of the most incredible voice acting we've ever seen in games. So, you know, for me, that was a game that touched me so personally, and I was so surprised. And also, if you replay it now during lockdown, it's really strange.
Yeah. I think that is like one of my favorite gaming soundtracks as well. The score to that is like my go-to when I need to like get a lot of writing done, or I'm sitting down with a book. That's like the perfect relaxing background music. And you're right, the voice acting, like, incredible. And I don't know if it's just because they were all British that it felt really a bit more relatable. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, well, that is the end of our 3 quickfire questions. We just want to say thank you so much for joining us on this panel. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you and hear about your experience in the industry and how you've been doing. Do you want to just let everyone know where they can find you online, on any social media, and like plug any work that you're doing at the minute?
Yep, so you can find me at Elle Osili-Wood. I'm there on, you know, almost anything, but in particular Twitter, if you want to know what I'm up to. I'm constantly tweeting about where I'll be, what I'm doing, where you can watch me. So definitely check me out there, and also elleosili-wood.com, where I kind of talk about the work I'll be doing. But thank you so much for having me. I love the work of Into Games. If you're out there and you do want to get into games, this is the place for you.
Thank you very much. Brandon, do you just want to let people know what we're up to at Into Games and where they can find us there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say first step, get onto intergames.org website. It's a huge database of every possible job that you could ever want to do in the industry, from a programmer to community manager to technical artist to 3D modeler, everything, along with interviews of people who work in those roles as well. If you or your school or educational institution or whoever wants to get industry involved with some stuff that you're doing with young people, head over to the Video Game Ambassadors. Or if you're a young person from an underrepresented group interested in working closely with someone in the industry, then hit up our mentorship program. We've got loads and loads of stuff that you can get involved with. But yeah, check out the website first, or check us out on Twitter at IntoGamesHQ.
Yeah, be sure to definitely follow us on Twitter. We do weekly Twitter Q&As with industry professionals. We've had people such as Victoria Tran from KitFox. We've got Frankie Ward coming up, the esports host. So it's going to be fantastic. And definitely stay tuned for new episodes of the podcast. Thank you very much.